We have a special guest, and I've asked him to talk for a few minutes about something that you probably have seen, and that is Ken Burns. Ken Burns, as all of you probably know, is the greatest chronicler of American history on his documentaries, and he has one on TV now on Vietnam. And how many have already seen part of it? Ready? All right. How many watch the Civil War? Okay. So Ken, I've asked Ken to come up and talk a little bit about Vietnam series. And Ken, can you come up now? Okay. Okay.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. This was unexpected, but happy to share with you. I feel a little bit like Odysseus. I've spent the last 10 years of my life working on a history of a film project on what I think is the most important event in American history since the Second World War, certainly the most important event in the second half of the 20th century for Americans. And another way to think about it is to understand the great gift that history is to us and how much, as Mark Twain says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and how many rhymes in the present we can hear and distill from the Vietnam experience. So I would often tell audiences out on the road talking about the broadcast that took place, the initial broadcast that took place in September, that what if I told you I had been working on a film for the last 10 years about mass demonstrations taking place all across the United States against the President of the United States, about a White House in disarray, obsessed with leaks, about a president absolutely sure that the press is lying and making up stories about him, about asymmetrical warfare that confounds even the mighty might of the U.S. military, about big, huge document drops of stolen classified material into the public sphere that destabilizes our conversation, and accusations that a political campaign reached out to a foreign power at the time of a national election to affect that election. You would have said you have abandoned history and you're talking about our present moment. But in fact, all of those things were true of the Vietnam War, along with thousands of other things that rhyme, when we began the project in 2006 and when we finished it editorially before the Iowa caucuses in 2016. So we begin to understand what an extraordinary teacher history can be. The film we made is 10 parts in 18 hours. It was shown on public broadcasting, which has been my home for 40 years, there in September in an unprecedented fashion. PBS normally gets a 0.8 rating at any given time. It's big enough to make it one of the highest rated networks. But we had a 6 rating and 11.5 million viewers just for the first episode alone. And we talk about all the time having some kind of national conversation about things that matter, about race, about guns, about public policy, about war, about involvement. And that's a really fallacious idea. What we're very pleased to report from the battleground of the Vietnam War series is that we have been able to ignite millions and millions of individual conversations across the country, across the nation, so that fathers are now, for the first time, talking to sons and daughters about what they did. Grandfathers are doing the same thing. Grandmothers are asking questions. And we've begun to take a very reticent generation. Vietnam is still extraordinarily unresolved for us, and begun to sort of melt the hardened silos that people have found themselves in since the fall of Saigon 42 years ago. We've also have an extraordinary relationship now with the country of Vietnam. They are not only an economic partner, but an increasingly important strategic partner. They themselves are still contesting the war within their own country. The narrative from that communist regime was that it was a singular thing, the victory of the people. Nobody went to individual soldiers and asked them what they did or what they felt, as we did. North Vietnamese soldiers and civilians, Viet Cong guerrillas, South Vietnamese civilians and South Vietnamese soldiers, as well as a whole array of Americans who populate our film, that remind us that there is no one single truth in things, particularly in war. And so the Vietnamese are wrestling with the fact that their government never told them about a single defeat. Their government never showed a picture of their own dead. The government has never been able to integrate fully those who supported the existence of the state of South Vietnam. And they are beginning now to question the overall strategy that the North Vietnam employed, which was to not count the cost. We are appalled by the 58,000 who died and whose names are listed on the wall so movingly on the mall. But they had 3 million dead out of a country of 30,000, and there's not a family that's not touched by it. And a lot of the fact that there are 3 million dead is because they knew they could wear us down and that we would eventually tire of the war, which happened. But they never stopped to consider the loss of life. And we interviewed a lot of soldiers who were a soldier who was the only person in his apartment building to come home alive. So what's interesting about our new media environment is that we no longer have appointment television. We had a strong footprint at that national broadcast, but it's been available for streaming. The DVDs came out the day after the series started, and we are, every day that I've woken up, somebody has emailed me or texted me that they just finished the 10 episodes and wanted to comment about what they felt. So I know you lead very busy lives. Maybe this is not on your radar screen, but if you want to know a little bit about where we are now and perhaps where we're going, you could do worse than to study this most important event in American history since the Second World War. Thank you very much, and enjoy your breakfast.